How's it going, everybody? It's Datum, and today we are going to get to some actual content. Now, over the last few days, just had a lot of stuff going on, two different jobs, learning all these things, putting more things together, getting set dressing going, and all that. So, this is going to be my first attempt at doing some React kind of commentary type videos, and it's about a subject that I know a lot about, which is game design. And really, I'm going to talk about how games have been going recently and where the meaning and the value has been being put in games and how it's been changing. And this relates to a lot of things, a lot of different games that I've played, like World of Warcraft, how it's evolved, EVE Online, Path of Exile, and a few others. Really kind of focusing on MMOs, but kind of talking about RPGs also in general. So I'm going to put that all together and we're going to see how it goes. So, like, subscribing, hitting the bell, and telling me what you think about what I'm talking about today. There's going to be a broad list of things. So, let's see what you think along with what I know. Let's get into it.
Is a deeper question altogether, which is, what do you desire? What makes you itch? What sort of a situation would you like?
It's a very interesting question to start out with. I think a lot of people that are playing RPGs and MMOs have this question, like what is it about this game that is going to make me want to play it and me part of the living community along with the lore that's established. There's a lot of questions there, and there are some answers that kind of come through this presentation.
Let's suppose, I do this often in vocational guidance of students. They come to me and say, well, we're getting out of college and we haven't the faintest idea what we want to do.
So this kind of thing just blows my mind that you could be, I don't know, 22 years old and still not know what you want to do with your life. It might just be the difference between me and most people. I knew what I wanted to do with my life since I was about 8 years old. Uh, I wanted to go in the military because it was very important to my family, and that I knew that would afford me the opportunity to go to college and get more educated. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do something in gaming and entertainment. And I've been doing both of those things basically since I knew what they were and established them. I'm not really a programmer, so I've gone a kind of it at more of the designer and marketing angle. So yeah, I don't know how you could be 22 and not know, but I know that that's the situation for a lot of people. Um, I don't know. There have to be like short-term things. There has to be all the stuff in the way of actually figuring out who you are. And yeah, it's kind of mystifying to me, but you are one of those people. Let me know. How did it go? What did you have to work through?
So I always ask the question, what would you like to do if money were no object? How would you really enjoy spending your life? Well, it's so amazing. As a result of our kind of educational system, crowds of students say, well, we'd like to be painters, we'd like to be poets, we'd like to be writers, but as everybody knows, you can't earn any money that way. Or another person says, well, I'd like to live an out-of-doors life and ride horses. I say, do you want to teach in a riding school? Let's go through with it. What do you want to do? When we finally got down to something which the individual says he really wants to do, I will say to him, you do that. And forget the money. Because if you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living, that is, to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid.
Yes. Now, this is kind of easy to say if you're in a situation where you can do something and have some kind of stability without having to worry about the money. Now, some of the things that people are saying that they want to do, it's kind of, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually what they want to do. In RPG and MMO design, they put out there what they think the activities are that people want to interact with and makes a community and makes people need to work together and trade and that kind of thing. But people don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do. Like when somebody asks them this question, they might think of something that would be something they enjoy as a hobby for fun for a little while. But anything that you do day in and day out is going to tax you at some level. I know when I was doing professional storytelling that sometimes it got to the point where it was I wasn't really looking forward to it. But the whole thing about doing work is that you're doing it in a way that people can depend on and that you're the reliable one. You're taking on a bunch of the burden of getting that thing done. So there's going to be physical, mental challenges, and you're going to have to push through. Now, in the second part of this thing, it's talking about wasting your life doing things that you don't want to do things that you don't want to do. And that is 100%. Like, you want to set up your life to where most of the time you're doing something that is something you want to do. But there may be some things that you don't want to do or think you can't do that are going to be in the way of doing it, being in always in that mode of wanting to do it. So I don't think this means that you should never do anything that's hard or practice or grow, but you have to at least have some kind of end goal when it comes to doing those things that help you grow and learn and those kind of things. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have something in mind, then it's going to be really bad out there.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And after all, if you do really like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you can eventually turn it, you could eventually become a master of it. It's the only way to become a master of something, to be really with it. And then you'll be able to get a good fee for whatever it is. So don't worry too much. Somebody's interested in everything. And anything you can be interested in, you'll find others who are.
And I think this is a really great point for especially nowadays where we have a lot more opportunity to work on mastery instead of just working on survival. If you're in a situation where survival isn't what you're working on, and it kind of goes back to the last point of maybe that's where you're at. Maybe a lot of life is you just being in the moment with the decisions that you've made and surviving through that. Now, what I would tell you is drop everything that you can. Like as much as you can simplify your life and actually work on the things that you want to work on. I know that's way easier to say than to do, but everybody that I know that's done that is mostly happy, mostly still motivated, and mostly still growing and doing more and becoming more and more of a master of what they really enjoy doing. So to get this kind of back to some of the stuff in RPGs and MMOs, when you have a character and you get to those points of mastery, like you get to a maximum level, you get to the mastery of a rotation or what you're supposed to do to be maximally effective as an RPG or MMO player, well, you've achieved mastery, but at that point, you have to shift your goal. You have to figure out what do I do when I have personally achieved most mastery? Well, it's really simple. You have to start to branch out and work with other people that are trying to also achieve mastery. If you just if you stop with yourself, then you stop there. Nobody remembers who you are. Nobody will care when you go. You have to start understanding that things aren't just about you, and they're about community, they're about legacy, they're about work and mastery on a level that you can't achieve by yourself. You get to community and civilization level of mastery and actualization.
But it's absolutely stupid to spend your time doing things you don't like in order to go on spending things you don't like, doing things you don't like, and to teach your children to follow in the same track. See, what we're doing is we're bringing up children and educating them to live the same sort of lives we're living, in order that they may justify themselves and find satisfaction in life by bringing up their children, to bring up their children to do the same thing. So it's all wretch and no vomit. It never gets there.
Now, there is the biological reality of, we want human civilization to go on. So I don't think this is really just saying, well, you should just focus on yourself and never have a family or pass that on. I mean, that's actually kind of the thing. It's like you take mastery, you attract somebody, you have children, they do well in their life and achieve mastery. I mean, like that's a way to where you're kind of stepping out of the cycle of, well, I'm just trying to survive. But really a lot of that has to do with the family environment and moreover the cultural environment that you're in. If you're in a cultural environment that doesn't put value on these things like community building and developing others, then you could be stuck in a cycle like this, and it would just all be about trying to survive and not thriving and having mastery over the things that you're doing.
And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?
And this is a super broad question. It's a lot more than you might even think. What you desire is a lot more than what makes you happy. It's a lot more than what keeps you going. Kind of like, what is all the meaning that in the things that I would be doing. So RPGs MMO wise, this has to do with, okay, well, these are the things out in the environment that we can do. We can do this group stuff. It's got different sizes, got instance content, we got open world content. They got all these things that we can do. And some of them you can leverage a group and some of them you can't. And those are the choices a lot of these MMO spaces that have been made. There's basically spots for everybody of different kinds of personalities and timelines on how much they can play and all these different variables. The issue that I see is that in a lot of games they try and spread out, do more for a bigger audience, but then they lose the push on the core of what they're trying to do. I know that that's mostly what's happened in World of Warcraft, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the changes that have happened and what that means as we go through.
Well, when we answer that question in a naive way, we figure out that we want a desire, what we want is to control everything. To create girls that don't grow old, apples that don't rot, clothes that never wear out, conveyances that get from one place to another instantly so we don't have to wait, power available to do anything that you could conceive and do it just instantly like that. To get this funny technological omnipotence. But if you take time out to think about that, and really go into it with your full strength of imagination and find out whether that's where you want to be, you will soon see that's not what you want.
That's what happens. This is the This is the change between the comedy of the common man versus the tragedy of the noble man. You have to really change what you're thinking about and what goals you have once you get to this place of stability. I've been in this place of stability for a while now, like 6 years, and been working up and doing what I can to improve myself, doing what I can to improve pretty much everybody that I come in contact with on social media, try and get them to be actualized in what they're doing, and somebody or the interest group that is going to be interested in what they're doing to see the big challenge. And in MMOs and RPGs, this is a thing where you can have a design goal for the core of your game, but once you do expansions, you have to figure out something else. You have to figure out the other ambitions and the other ways to get people interested in playing your game. And this is crazy not easy because you've got your first game, maybe you worked on it for 10 years, and now you have to create a sequel basically in real time. You don't have any backlog of time. The longer that you wait to release something, the more that people have to stay at whatever level and whatever goals that you've set in the game, unless you have a game where it allows the players to do a lot of the goal setting, which is something that EVE Online does. And I think really, if MMOs kind of understood that and embraced things that direction, that they would have more interesting things happen, more content. Now, I know with RPGs and MMOs, what they're trying to do is create a box because they want interactions of a certain way, because certain interactions they can market that they are appealing to people that maybe don't actually play the game. So anything that's outside of that, any of those other interactions that they wouldn't want, well, if you're gonna have a stranglehold on your environment, then there's going to be a lot of content and opportunity lost. So EVE Online has a lot of this opportunity, but it also has a very harsh environment where people don't stick around very much unless they've been there for a long time and gone through that and understand that. I've gone back to EVE Online and played 6 different times. That is just the game that it is. Every time you step up a little bit in what you're doing, where you create value for the group that you're with, and what you do to actually have a good time in that environment. It's a very complex thing, but it's something where once you get to those big milestones, you always have to have the next milestone. You don't want to wait until you have reached what you feel like is your big milestone. You need one, two, or three or more in front of you to make sure that you still keep going and you still have the drive to succeed in that environment.
Because the moment you have a situation where you are really in control of things, that is to say, in which the future is almost completely predictable, you will see, as I said last night, that a completely predictable future is already the past. You've had it.
Now, in MMO design, particularly content design that is focused around stuff, like focused around getting more resources or better gear or something like that, some people want some sense of finality. Like, okay, I'm in this tier, I've got the best that I can get, I'm finished. But they think they want that. This is another thing, like the part of earlier in the presentation, where they think that they want this finality, but really they don't. I mean, the only way that really works is like they go on to doing something else. I think if you were to look in any of these games, armories or those kind of things, I I would almost guarantee you that some of the most or a high percentage of the people that basically have that best layout don't even play because they're playing on an alt, they're playing PvP, they're doing something that isn't there because there's no more progression to be had. Now, what they've been trying to do with some of the gearing now is to get rid of that. To be like, okay, well, here's this finality, but here's the best pieces, but there are all these things, kind of more like an action RPG, where if they don't, all the stars don't align and it's not perfect, then you still have some reason to go into that PvP content and keep playing. And I don't think that there's any other way to do it if they want to make PvP perpetual. There's no way to make people happy, both that want the finality and want that perpetual situation. I mean, if you're on the cutting edge and you're on one of these teams or something like that, you're the top 0.0001% of people that play MMOs at that level, and you've turned it into social media and you've turned it into basically a career. Well, they want that. They want progression that never ends, because that means that they can keep on producing similar content to an audience that they already have, and it's going to be good for them. Your average person that has, like, I don't know, maybe 10 hours a week or something or so to play these games, they want finality. They want, like, be like, okay, well, I go in, I do this thing, I got a chance for this, cool, this is the thing, there it is. This is where I think that the expectation should be different. Like, people should in a gearing situation should be like, okay, well, if I put about this much effort in, this is about where I'm going to be, and that's where I'm going to be, and there's no way that I would have been anywhere else anyway, even in a completely static gear system, because you just don't play enough. I've been in this situation basically the whole time that I've been playing MMOs. I play a good amount, but I play probably less than half of what the people that are at the very top play. So there's no way for me to join those groups, because I don't I don't put in the time. I have other things, life, work, those kind of things, and I can't expect to have the pinnacle of everything. And I don't even I'm mythic rated for a long time. I barely ever even did it in World of Warcraft's history. So I think it's really like a communication issue. I think the game itself is in an okay place, but it's like the expectation. Hey, I'm gonna spend about this much time and I'm gonna do this thing, that no matter how much effort you put in, that you're gonna be able to have a spot in world first contention for titles and be on teams and be on the big stage on. You're not. It's a professional thing. And if that's not your profession, you need to understand that your hobby is a hobby. And if more people had that real kind of cut and dry, okay, well, I'm just not going to get there because these guys are doing it twice as hard as I ever could. If you're ever able to change your mindset of where you sit in the this long tail, big bell curve of what you do in a very complex environment like World of Warcraft, then you can feel much better about what you do. And you can also say, okay, well, I do pay monthly for this. I want to get my money's worth, but also there's all these other things that I could do in the world other than play the MMO. So I think it really is perspective. And I think a lot more people that play MMOs a lot of hours have the potential to take some of that time and be more creative with it. Whether it's still playing the games and doing some content around it that is actually interesting and different, stands out a bit, or they are able to focus on other things. Like, personally, I thought streaming was the way to go, but really it's not. For me, I got bandwidth issues that are pretty bad, and it's just not gonna change. I'm not gonna move uh 200 miles closer to infrastructure. I've got a home and a life out in the boonies, and so I'm never going to be on the cutting edge of infrastructure. But what I can do is I can do these things that are not live and do them much better. And this has been kind of long on this point, but this is one of the biggest points in the presentation. You Once you get to these one of these kind of predictable spots, you have to be ready to go beyond.
And that's not what you wanted. You want a surprise. And you don't know what that's going to be, because obviously it wouldn't be a surprise if you did.
This point is all about, as they continue to develop these games that have been around for over a decade, they have to take big risks. But when they're an IP that has a certain value, and you've got, all these different forces that are in these public companies, the want and desire for them to take the risks that they need to take is almost zero. This is a property that they have kind of put a price tag on, and once you have a price tag on it, unless you have to behave in a certain way to keep that level. Basically what it says is that you're kind of at the peak. You don't need to do anything new or innovative or whatever. You just need to reset the dial for another cycle, another year, another so many seasons in the game, and you've found your value. Well, if you do that for too long, there's going to be other games, other platforms, other places that are going to come out ahead. You're just sitting, you're trying to make these interesting, small, incremental design choices. You have these ideas for things that don't pan out, but when they don't pan out, it's not like you say, well, we tried to do that and we weren't really able to do it on the mechanics side, but we have a great storyline and more of the game to come. So instead of kind of shifting those things, it's kind of like they're abandoned and the next idea kind of takes center stage. And maybe sometimes that's the right thing to do. Maybe there's some ideas that are too ambitious and they're not going to come out in the game and it's not going to actually be any good. So this staying in this side, you have some stability, and this side you have something new. That's really what you want to do, and you want to make it to where the new thing doesn't it doesn't overtake everything else. Now, in a game like Path of Exile, that's kind of what happens. The new thing is the thing. Like it really blossoms out and kind of dominates that season. And that's the design choice that they've taken. And it's actually, from what I've seen, it's been pretty successful. But they execute very well almost every time. There have been a few seasons that in Path of Exile that people haven't really liked that much, but they only last for 13 weeks. It's crazy. Like they have their regular development cycle, and then they have the stuff where it's like we're just caching up stuff, we're just stocking stuff up to use in the future, and being able to reskin and repurpose things and add layers of complexity that aren't right out in your face, keep the game kind of simple, but the optimization of the game very deep. It's a beautiful game. I've been playing it for like 3 years now, and they have a great studio. They have a great design philosophy. They have a lot of creativity that some of these other games that have been out for longer, they just haven't been really taking those leaps. Something like EVE Online, they've actually been taking some of those things away, like filaments. And just so you know, filaments will send a group of up to 25 people somewhere randomly in Eve's galaxy. It's crazy. But people like they're called yeet fleets, you know, down with the kids, dabbing. It's like it's those are the things that are design choices and interesting little things that don't break game balance, but are a really interesting piece of content for some of the players. Those are the kind of things that those companies need to lean into. Those things, just highlight those things, make people see how fun and interesting those design choices are. And going forward with some of these games, I've mostly been talking about video games, but just RPGs in general. I mean, there's all kinds of different types of systems now. You have games that came from the war games like Dungeons and Dragons and the OSR, mostly centered games, but then you have games that are like more like Traveler is kind of like pre-apocalypse world. They're very similar in some ways, different in others, but you can kind of see the evolution of how some of these games are different. So now we have like the Cypher system. There's the Genesis system, which I thought was really good. It was I played it with the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. It has both storyteller and game master control. It's a pretty interesting thing. And then you have things like Fate, which are more kind of little pieces all come together, and you get this complex web of who people are and how they're related to each other and things as you're going into it. You have systems like the Forge system, which is they claim to be a system that's supposed to be like, okay, we're in the action, we're doing something, and then we talk a little bit about what happened in between, and then we're in the action again. And there's a lot under the hood of the Forge system. And then there's systems like Amber Diceless, which are all the way over on one other side, and that's all about like storytelling. And there's a lot of people that play by post Amber and that kind of thing. And there's so much room in RPG. We are spreading out. The niches are there though. Like if you're gonna make something that's gonna be interesting and new to people in RPG space, when we talked about it in the last searching for value video, that it's going to be about kind of prompting people to be creative and add those things. It's really hard. It's hard to find things that are going to really jump out and give value. It's kind of like what we're doing right here. It's just talking about things, discussing things sometimes, and that can be really a place to be. So we're gonna forge ahead and see what the where the surprise takes us.
You want a pleasant surprise. But like you say, what sort of a surprise would be pleasant? And you can't really answer that. Because if there are to be such things as pleasant surprises, there must also be unpleasant surprises. There must be rude shocks. So you're like somebody taking one of those wishing well boxes, tubs, where you fish in and you bring out a package. And you don't know whether you've got a dead rat in it or a new camera.
So this is like we're kind of at the pinnacle of this presentation. This is like the end of Act 1 in a 3-part. Surprises. Loot boxes. You see where we're going here? The surprise is now external to the main part of the game. It's very stable. And now the only way to get people excited about it is for them to throw some dollars at it and then have, surprise on demand. It doesn't come really through gameplay. And this is where I think this is why World of Warcraft has been leading off subscribers, because you're going to pay for a subscription game. You don't want to worry about any of this loot box stuff. then, that's kind of like a fixed income. You want fixed income, but you want more content and more interest. Well, you're only going to get fixed income, fixed interest, right? I think they've kind of done all the math on this, and it's like, well, to make interesting stuff, it takes more money, and they're only giving us blah blah blah. Then and they've gone through and seen, well, there's 1% of people that spend a bazillion dollars, and then the rest of the people spend a little bit more if you give them an opportunity, and that is that's how it always is. It's always been, always is. So the reason that the surprise and the meaning has left the platform and gone to the loot is because that's who we are as human beings. It's put more meaning onto something that we spend resources to get. Those things can be and really, there's been plenty of studies done. The higher the variance on things like this, the more exciting and more interest there is, and more people want to put money in. And some people think that it's like, oh, well, this is leveraging gambling addiction and those kind of things. And it's like, it's really just leveraging reality. Higher risk, higher reward. Like there are things about reality that you're not going to change even in virtual reality, because we are the anchor to reality. Unless you change that, this is where things are always going to go. What it really takes is somebody that has that backlog and that passion and that time to put together a new IP that's going to take all the attention away from these things. And they're going to do things, a certain way at the beginning, and then they're going to make their money as creators and designers, and at some point they're going to have a price. Almost, I mean, there's never been really a situation where I've seen that somebody hasn't had the price and gotten out and sold, and then people tend to think that that brand is the same once all that changes. This is something where, personally, I feel like intellectual property, this is something that the government might be able to step into and be like, look, if you sell the name and you don't have the same product, you don't have the same people, you don't have the same anything, that's very deceptive. There isn't really anything that's good for the consumer on that end. So I would really say it's like this brand shuffling that's been going on for a long time now. I mean, a lot of the brands that I can think of, like EA, Blizzard, Activision, Logitech. That's why I use a Corsair headset now, and Corsair might actually have sold, at some point or whatever. But it's this headset has worked out a lot better. Just that kind of surprise isn't great. If a company sells the shell, or like, the top shell of what it is, and then none of the actual value goes with it, well, it's deceptive. It's just like deceptive marketing. It should have to be very apparent that those kind of things are the thing. But so, like, for business, that's what something that I'm thinking of. RPGs, something. MMOs, something. This is really great, and I want to talk about these things for a long time, so we will keep going.
And that's the way. That seems to be the thing that really excites people. But quite certainly there comes out of this inquiry a feeling of real disillusionment with the ideal of power. To be in power, to be in control, is not something that any sensible person wants. Now, you may say that's shirking responsibility. That if you were a really responsible person, you would go out for power and try to use power to the best possible advantage for the benefit of all. All right, what would be the benefit of all? Ask them. What do you want me to do with this power? I'm dictator. What would you like me to do? Well, nobody knows, because they haven't thought it through.
Big, 7,000 IQ stuff right here. When you're an organizer, when you are a group leader, there's a lot of responsibility that's put onto you. That is not that is not something that most people actually want. What they want is they want the ability to influence, they want the ability to get more for themselves in these positions, and it's because, well, there isn't, if you don't have any other goals in mind, that is what you're going to go for. The reason I think a group like the Imperium and Goonswarm Federation and EVE Online is very effective is because they have a very clear, concise, easy mission, and it is our people deserve the best. And that's it. That is it. So our people deserve the best. So they set up situations where they can give their people as much as they can so their people can give more back to them and they can be one of the biggest superpowers in that game. It's hard to compete with that, no matter what you do, because if your intentions aren't as pure as that, then at some point, whatever you're doing is going to come tumbling down, because you have to have support. There has to be this kind of, I don't want to say philanthropic, but there has to be this volunteerism behind what you're doing. If it's there, you're going to go and you're going to keep going and you're going to get power and influence. And then what you do with that is going to show how you're going to kind of be remembered and go on in the future. Like somebody like Mr. Beast. I've heard him being talked about a lot recently. I mean, invested almost everything that he's ever made early in social media, so he got that big margin and that some of that first mover advantage, and he's practically reinvested all of it. Same thing with like some Mr. Bezos with Amazon and that kind of thing. I mean, these guys, they're worth the world, but they also are in charge, or like they have assets that are worldwide. It's not the same. Like you look at somebody who's got net worth, and you're like, man, this guy's worth billions of dollars, and it's like, then you realize, well, he's got a little bit more walking around money than probably most people that are reasonably successful in any size business. How is that? Well, he just keeps going, keeps reinvesting, keeps doing things in the way that the market is responding to positively. So these guys are the top winners, and they keep less for themselves when it comes to percentage than basically everybody else out there. It's really amazing. It's amazing to kind of see those guys, and those are some of the guys that I personally really look up to and look at their content and see what can I learn and how can I try and do the same.
They think of all sorts of short-range things, and they are largely conflicting and confusing because they're not well thought out. But again, when it finally comes down to it, nobody wants to be God. Now, I think that this is the greatest possible lesson for the Western world to learn, because we are so hung up on the idea of power.
Definitely. Social media right now, it's all about power. Who can say what? Who can say what about who? All of these things go together. But as we can see, like the short-term thinking, you do have those short-term goals. You have to have some short-term goals, right? But it can't be everything. You have to have short-term goal, long-term philosophy. I think that's really the best way to go, and I think that's what a lot of people are lacking right now is the long-term philosophy. see things on the table and they see some opportunities, they want to take those, but morality, is it the right decision for me? Is it the right decision for the people around me? A lot of those are no's, and that's why a lot of those kind of ideas and things don't turn out great. And the idea that nobody wants to be God, it's like, well, to be perfectly honest, nobody can be God because that's not part of our process. Our process is to learn through doing and learn from failure. God doesn't have to do that. Already, that's not it's not where he is. I did it at one point, if people believe it or not, but so it's got that perspective. He's got the up here perspective. He's got the down here perspective, and then there's the, will and the empowerment that comes from that. And there's your Trinity, baby. All right, we got religion in here. We got religion, a little bit of politics. I'm sure to be demonetized. I sure hope so. We're getting to really some of the good stuff about, there is this pursuit for basically being able to look at everything all the time. And there's a lot of power in that, but really, once you start looking, then you start wanting to like try and change things because you can see everything. When you try and do that, that's where you get the pushback. That's where you get, people looking at what you're doing and saying, you might not want to do this that way. Could be bad for you, could be bad for everybody. And I think that's where we're at right now with some of these companies. Really got to watch it. I think a lot of them are about to get regulated, and mostly their own fault. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a trillion hours of video on that topic, I'm sure. So we'll move on.
Of control, of being able to make everything go the right way, and we've never thought it through. When you get control of it, what are you going to do with it? And so when you think things through like that, you understand you do not want power. You don't want to control everything. And therefore, in the exploration of what you want, you get to the point where having all pleasures at your command, and they pall, and you think of new sources of pleasure. And eventually you get like the ancient Romans, who had all these mad crowds of barbarians who had to go every Saturday to the Colosseum for a show that really had to surpass everything. Because they had public baths, they had prostitutes, they had every kind of luxury. But when they went to see one of the big shows that people like Nero put on, they would have, for example, floats circling the Colosseum, all full of slave girls from distant parts of the Mediterranean, garlanded with flowers and waving at the crowd and going innocently around. And the next minute they would release wild lions into the arena to eat up all the slave girls. And they got a big sadistic kick out of that. Because you see, pursuing pleasure beyond a certain place takes you into what the Buddhists call the Naraka world, that is to say, the hells. When you have explored pleasure to its ultimate limit, the only thing you can get a kick out of is pain. And so naturally, you descend from the Deva world at the top of the wheel to the Naraka world at the bottom, where it shows all these beings in states of torture. You get to the hell world as a result of not knowing what you want. As a result of thoughtless pursuit of pleasure, which ends you eventually in the pursuit of pain. So when you're in the hell world, that's where you want to be.
There's really not more truth to that. It's like, why does it seem like people that are at the very top do what they can to sabotage what they have. That's because of this, because their idea of what they want is here. Not really not really where you can keep your mind, especially in a time, a world of abundance and prosperity. So you can't be thinking here. You have to be thinking here. And a lot of people don't want to have those philosophical, theological conversations because, well, it's uncomfortable. So there are ways, people try communicate them in a way that more palatable. At some point, those people are just they're gonna put themselves in the pit. You don't even have to do anything about it. One of the reasons why some of the crazy political stuff that's out there, I don't really worry about it because it's like a it's like a star. It's like burning so hot that it's self-immolating. And you see something that's self-immolating and it's an issue, the issue is just gonna go down and down and down. It's gone. So, and you don't have to do anything about it. All you have to do is stand your ground. That's what I tell some people out there that I've interacted with on social media that are worried about people attacking them and that kind of thing. Now, when it comes to the RPG and MMO world, this is really just kind of like, this is creative space. You can highlight this. You can bring these themes into your games with your mechanics and all that. And make it to where being wealthy basically brings out the wolves, because that's what happens. It's actually what happens in Dwarf Fortress. Part of the algorithms of who attacks you and that kind of thing have to do with how much wealth your fortress has. They've got some of that built in. Other games could really learn. Yeah, just learn from human condition.
So when I ask, I go right down to the question, should we start it with, what do I want? The answer is, I don't know. When Bodhidharma was asked, who are you, which is another form of the same question, he said, I don't know, planting flowers to which the butterflies come. Bodhidharma says, I know not. I don't know what I want. Well, when you don't know what you want, you've reached the state of desirelessness. When you really don't know. But you see, there's a beginning stage of not knowing, and there's an ending stage of not knowing. In the beginning stage, you don't know what you want because you haven't thought about it, or you've only thought superficially. And then when somebody forces you to think about it and go through and say, yeah, I think I'd like this, I think I'd like that, I think I'd like the other, there's the middle stage. Then you get beyond that. Say, is that what I really want? In the end you say, no, I don't think that's it. I might be satisfied with it for a while, and I wouldn't turn my nose up at it, but it's not really what I want. Why don't you really know what you want? 2 reasons that you don't really know what you want. Number 1, you have it.
That's the big thing. A lot of these games and situations, RPGs and stuff, it's like, got it. You have to have some kind of external or internal threat to that. You're only going to have internal turmoil in an RPG if you as the player are kind of bringing that in a lot of systems. There are some systems where it's like you don't have so much complete and total control over your character, and that's where I kind of think that the most interesting things happen. The less that you feel like you have to have complete control over your character, the more that there is interesting, unexpected consequences that you're going to have to deal with. So, I mean, that's what I would recommend to people kind of trying to spice up their RPGs a little bit. Let you as the player need to let go. Like a lot of people are like, well, you as a game master kind of need to give out over some of the control of the game. Most players don't want it. I would consider games that are they tried to not have a game master, or do something that's completely collaborative. Those games are intermediate games. Those are games for game masters to play with game masters. It's a totally different experience, and it takes a lot more energy. So players, they're at a different energy level. You know, put a little bit of energy into a character, they've got them and what they're gonna do. Being a game master is a huge step up from that when it comes to the energy, and kind of going along with the theme of not really knowing. Well, that's where every like going through this thing where it's like you don't really know at the beginning. Well, you don't really know at the beginning. You don't you haven't had enough time to try things and experiment and that kind of thing. You're gonna feel like you suck. Nobody cares, and those are the feelings that you're gonna have. Well, if you push through that, you learn more, you develop more. You're gonna get to that middle stage where it's like, yeah, I'm at the top of things. I know some of what I'm talking about. I know where things are, and I like where things are. And then things are gonna go different directions. There's gonna be different people playing different ways and wanting different things, and what you want might not be what it used to be. And in those situations, you're gonna you stay there, you're not going to get to that self-actualization point to where you could talk to any of those people and any of them about the fundamentals and the philosophies behind why we get together to play RPGs. What kind of division of labor is there? There are some things that I've learned when it comes to giving players, over some of the duties of keeping track of things and of taking suggestions on things that are kind of newly being added. But a lot of that becomes front work. It's like you want to have some of their input at the beginning so you don't have to like really kind of tear it out of people during it. That's one of those things about having the time to think about what, like basically taking the wants and the needs and the values that people are looking for in the RPG and bringing them in. In the MMO space, what happens, I think, is that games live too long. I think World of Warcraft has overlived its welcome. They are in a place where it's not a fantasy RPG anymore. It's an immortals RPG. It's like, and it kind of started out that way because I mean, you can't completely die in World of Warcraft or anything, but really and truly, like everything has to be like we're basically at like existence level threat, like of the entire the entire existence of everything, right? Um, there's nowhere else to go from there except for back to simpler development, new IP. Nowhere else to go. You've rode Warcraft all the way through. The only thing that you can do is go back in time, keep going back in time, and you can keep. It's kind of like with Magic the Gathering. Like they know that they're in this recursive situation where they've explored a lot of things, and that returning to some of those things on a regular basis is where their value is, where it you know they're pulling from those designers of the past. And there isn't really anything wrong with that if the quality is there, if the passion is still there. Some of these things like MTG, I think it's still had it. It's pretty much had it the whole time. It keeps getting better. The game's amazing. and has been, and hopefully will continue to be. Some of these things like RPGs, they don't really make they don't make the front money. It's like I like to think of the RPGs situation as like, this is the social media of game design. This is really where you can get out there, be creative, and get some attention, and then parlay that into other gaming opportunities, such as, the some of the purest of the RPG side is professional storytelling, and I've done a bit of that, and it was quite the journey. It's still way in the RPG space, but you can go from there. You can get into video games and get into things that are more or not tactile. What's the word? Concrete products that can be marketed, sold. So yeah, let's get to reason number 2.
Number 2, you don't know yourself, because you never can. The Godhead is never an object of its own knowledge. Just as a knife doesn't cut itself, fire doesn't burn itself, light doesn't illumine itself. It's always an endless mystery to itself. I don't know. And this I don't know, uttered in the infinite interior of the spirit, this I don't know is the same thing as I love, I let go, I don't try to force or control. It's the same thing as humility. Any time you, as it were, voluntarily let up control, in other words, cease to cling to yourself, you have an access of power. Because you're wasting energy all the time in self-defense, trying to manage things, trying to force things to conform to your will. The moment you stop doing that, that wasted energy is available. And therefore, you are, in that sense, having that energy available, you are one with the divine principle. You have the energy. When you're trying, however, to act as if you were God, that is to say, you don't trust anybody and you're the dictator and you have to keep everybody in line, you lose the divine energy. Because what you're doing is simply defending yourself. So then, the principle is, the more you give it away, the more it comes back.
So this is some of the law of attraction. Some of this, like, there's a movie out there called The Secret, talks about some of this kind of thing. There's no guarantee that when you give that you're going to receive. And it really depends on where you are and around you. Building those peers and that environment is just as important as doing what this shows, having humility and that kind of thing. A lot of it has to do with some of the ideas that have been around for a very long time. I'm Orthodox Catholic, and not knowing is a very big part of it. You don't have to know everything about everything. You don't have to have an answer for everything. Some things are just mysterious, and that's as good as we know for now. And that is good enough. Where you're not constantly consumed by the ideas of what is and why, basically science of things that we can't measure. Once you understand that those things may just be out of our reach, that you kind of render that, concentrate on what this shows. You really do. It changes who you are. You have the energy to do things that are possible. Yeah, once you get to a certain level of self-actualization, it is incredible. Now, you have to realize that not everybody is there. So you still have to live and work and and help those that aren't there to get to a place where they're closer or have a better idea or let go a little. And I think that's the big thing is like knowing that you might be there or closer to there or have some of these things to offer and think that everybody should just immediately be that way. And it's like, well, it just doesn't happen. You have to go through, you have to you have to experience, you have to learn, you have to love, and you have to let go, and you have to have the opportunities to build something. And then really I think the essence of it, the key to basically any business opportunity, any great design choice in an RPG or MMO is seeing the opportunity before anybody else and also seeing when the opportunity is over for anybody else. You can do those two things. What you're doing is allowing for all of the things that are out in the world that you can't control to happen, but for you to be also be able to see that, let go, regroup, get ready for your next adventure.